Good morning, everyone. It is so wonderful to see you all here today. Welcome to the 2024 Annual Diversity and Inclusion Conference here at the Royal Academy of Engineering. My name is Rosa Morgan-Baker and I'm Senior Manager for Diversity and Inclusion here at the Academy, and I lead on all of our work with industry within D&I. I really can't believe it's been a year since I last stood before you all. What a year it has been. It is so great to be here with you, and whether you're in the room here with me, and it's wonderful to see such a packed room, if you're joining us online from all around the world, we are absolutely delighted to have you with us. Each year, the Academy's D&I conference has burrowed deeper into inclusive practice, seeking to convene and inspire engineering industry and the profession. In 2021, we looked at how we can create change within engineering. 2022 allowed us to dig into what works in creating that change. In 2023, we started to explore how we could build inclusive cultures. And this year, we shine a light on a critical aspect of sustaining that culture, ensuring that inclusive engineering outcomes and by harnessing the power of diverse thought. We have a truly exciting day ahead, and with some absolutely phenomenal speakers with insights to be shared. Along the way, I shall be your host and guide, popping up lots of times to keep things ticking along. Before we start, let me share our housekeeping notices. So there is, you'll be very grateful to know, no fire, we're definitely not scheduling any fires, but there's also no fire alarms scheduled for today. If the fire alarm should sound, please do look out for the Academy team, who will be in high-vis jackets and will be able to guide you to the nearest exit. To our online guests, hopefully you know where your exits are. If there is a fire, you don't have to keep watching. Today's event will be recorded with all of our seminars being shared online at a later date. That means that if you miss a session or want to revisit or share some of the onstage action with your networks, you can do so via our dedicated webpage. This will be updated with this and wider content as we continue to explore the theme of harnessing the power of diverse thought across the next year. The QR code on your tables or the link in the chat for those online will be able to take you through to our dedicated webpage so that you can download and see all of these resources. Unfortunately, our sign language interpreter, or one of our sign language interpreters, had to pull out at the last minute, and so only our morning sessions will be live translated today. We haven't had any delegates indicate that they need the translation today. However, we will ensure that all of the recordings have a translation superimposed on top of them when they go up online. There will be closed captioning throughout the day, so hopefully that will suffice, and we apologise for any inconvenience caused. There will be staff on hand to help if you have any questions or need assistance throughout the day. We are wearing these lovely lanyards, and we are a hugely friendly bunch, so please do approach us. A prayer room and a separate quiet space are both available should you wish to use them. Please do reach out to a member of the Academy team. For those of you joining online, my wonderful colleagues Eric, Susanna and Paula, hi team, are joining you online, and they'll be able to answer any of your queries on the chat. We'll be aiming to have our first break today. Everyone likes to know when the breaks are. So we'll have our first break today at around 11:50. We'll then break at around 1:25 for lunch, and the formal part of the day will close at around 4 p.m. Please do stick around to join us for networking and our specially curated Harnessing the Power of Diverse Thought exhibition, which will take place both online and in person. Finally, there are many opportunities throughout the day to pose your questions to our wonderful speakers. To ensure everyone has an equal chance of having their questions answered, we'll be taking limited questions from the floor today, with the majority of questions coming through our online Q&A platform, Slido. Please do have your phones and tablets to hand. You'll also have the chance to upvote other people's questions, so even if you don't have one of your own to pose, please do go on to Slido and make sure that the things that you want to hear are right at the top of that list. If you're in the room and do not have a mobile device, just flag down a member of the Academy team and they'll be able to help you to submit your questions. To get everyone used to the platform, we thought we'd actually open with a question for the audience. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to log into Slido using the details on screen on the QR tables on your the QR codes on your tables or the link in the chat. So our opening question is, what does diversity of thought mean to you? I can already see some things that are coming through. You guys are on it. So what does diversity of thought mean to you? It would be great if you could share a word or a short phrase. Now, I had a little bit of a head start in thinking about my answer, so I'll share mine to give you a little bit more time to pop yours into Slido. For me, diversity of thought is valuing and using the uniqueness of many minds to create something greater than what one mind could achieve. We're extremely honoured to have fantastic minds both here in this room and joining us online today, and I'm excited for the actions and solutions that we can create together that will be more than the sum of their parts. Let's have a little look and turn to see your thoughts. Brilliant. Greatness. I love that. I love that. The richness of perspectives, unique perspectives. Fantastic. I love that, like, some of these they're all like variations on a theme, but none are quite exactly the same. Key thoughts coming in being creative, experience, ideas, innovation. Absolutely, I'm sure that will be really reflected across the rest of today. Thank you so much for your insights. And wherever your mind is with diversity of thought, I hope that today supports you in developing your perspective. I feel that's probably enough from me now. You'll see me a lot throughout today. So it's my absolute great pleasure to be able to welcome our Head of Diversity and Inclusion, Joanna Whiteman, to officially kick us off.
Thanks, Rosa. I'm very embarrassingly hobbling around today. I managed to sprain my ankle on Monday, so yeah, if I take a dive, there's a stool for me. Anyway, good morning, everyone. And just to echo Rosa, welcome to the Royal Academy of Engineering's Diversity and Inclusion Annual Diversity and Inclusion Conference. As Rosa said, I'm the Head of Diversity and Inclusion at the Academy. I can take very little credit for today, however. The work has all been Rosa and the team. Thank you to both those of you who are in person and those of you who are online for joining us. We've got a really exciting day ahead. So please bear with me while I say a few words about the theme and what we're doing here at the Academy. So at the Royal Academy of Engineering, we're committed to building a sustainable society and an inclusive economy that works for everyone. Diversity and inclusion are at the heart of that effort. The reality is the world is changing, as we all know. There are emerging global and societal challenges, from climate change through to the entrenchment of bias by technologies such as the AI, and all of these require increasingly innovative and fair solutions. As we all know, engineering is uniquely placed to respond. But to deliver the most innovative and inclusive solutions, the profession must evolve to become more diverse and inclusive itself. Over the past year, we've taken some important steps at the Academy to support the profession to do this, as we've focused, as Rosa mentioned, on the theme of engineering inclusive cultures. At the beginning of 2023, our Inclusive Cultures report revealed that progress across the engineering industry has been made since we first surveyed the industry in 2017, but we still have a very long way to go. Fascinating insights on building inclusive cultures were provided to us throughout the year from some brilliant minds, among others, Ronnie Savage on International Women in Engineering Day, and at our Black History Month leadership lunch by Joanna and Dr Nike Falayan. Do catch up with those online, and they are there still to watch. The expansion of our work to support engineering industry has also continued, with 2 new exciting programmes launched. And I think some participants in those programmes are here, which is wonderful. Our Inclusive Leadership Programme provides wraparound support to businesses to enable them to intentionally develop inclusive practice. And our online platform, Culture Plus, provides tailored support for the small and medium businesses, which are the powerhouse of the engineering industry. Please do talk to the team throughout the day, go onto the website, follow us on social media to find out more. Otherwise, I could be here all day talking to you about our various D&I activities. Instead, for now, I want to turn to today. Our annual Diversity and Inclusion Conference is our flagship D&I event, designed to drive conversations and accelerate actions for the adoption of good practice in diversity and inclusion. This year, we have been deliberately provocative with our theme, Harnessing the Power of Diverse Thought. 10 years ago, Deloitte declared diversity of thought to be diversity's new frontier, moving us beyond a focus on demographic representation of women and others and getting businesses to think about individual uniqueness. Fast forward to 2019, and a Forbes headline shouted, "We need to stop talking about diversity of thought." Why? Because it's distracting us from the important work of increasing representation and belonging among minority groups in the workforce. We'll explore this lively topic today, both to provoke your thinking and strategies and to move towards greater diversity together and the greater innovation that it can bring to us in engineering. You'll notice 4 key touch points for the day, hopefully. Firstly, we wanted to ground the discussion in science. The complexity of the brain and its workings is awesome. The last thing you need is me, an ex-lawyer with not a single science A-level to my name, lecturing you on the cognitive diversity. I barely know what I'm thinking in any given moment, let alone why I'm thinking it. So too often, though, conversations on diversity of thought are grounded on generalities with no basis whatsoever in the complexity of human psychology. Good news is we have a wonderful guide in our keynote speaker and expert in cognitive neuroscience, Dr Francesca Happe, who I'll introduce you to shortly. Secondly, you'll take away insights, I hope, on neurodiversity. The need for a greater focus on inclusion for neurodivergent engineers in our profession is palpable. Our understanding of the value that they bring to tackling the engineering skills gap is combined with a chronic dearth of research into the barriers that they face to take part. The link between neurodiversity and diversity of thought is indeed intimate, but that's not to say that neuro-inclusion is the answer in full to diversity of thought. And I'd urge you to keep that distinction in mind as you listen to our insightful first panel, chaired by the wonderful Luke Logan, on cognitive diversity in engineering workplaces. Some really expert insights will be had there. Thirdly, you'll take away, I hope, the link between cognitive diversity and demographic diversity. For me, this is really crucial, and I'm going to spend a little bit of my time with you talking about it. Cognitive diversity refers to differences in perspective, insights, experiences, and thinking styles. Demographic diversity is what we understand through identities such as gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and so on. Demographic diversity impacts significantly on a person's perspectives and experiences in our unequal world. So cognitive diversity is inextricably linked to demographic diversity and will not be fully achieved without it. A personal anecdote, for me, university was a really key turning point in my understanding of my identity and both the unique perspectives I could bring and my blind spots. So I arrived at university in the very multicultural city of Nottingham from a town in the south of England where every single member of my school year group was white and most of us were working class. I'd grown up in a single parent household on free school meals. Money was always tight. So it was the biggest culture shock of my life at that point to arrive at a university and find that apparently 60% of my peer group had been educated in fee-paying schools. I remember in the first week, one of my peers invited a number of us to their room for a party, and it was absolutely decked out with every gadget, every tech you've ever seen. I could not fathom how no one else noticed this. My eyes were out in stalks, and I just felt completely different. I was a wannabe lawyer, and so you might imagine I got involved in debating. And as I did, it really hit me that despite how incredibly smart the people that I was in the room with were, the debates often really lacked depth. So I'd throw something in from the perspective of poverty or disadvantage, and people's eyes would widen, sort of genuinely, oh, I hadn't thought of that point before. Now, don't get me wrong, I was not, these were not groundbreaking insights. From my perspective, this was really obvious points that I was making, but no one else in the room had that perspective. University also exposed me to my huge levels of ignorance. For the first time in my life, genuinely the first time in my life from where I'd grown up, I realised that ethnic diversity exists in the UK. I was hearing from peers about their experiences of growing up Black and Muslim in Britain, and I was genuinely shocked. It was an absolute eye-opener for me. I had been completely blind to my white privilege until that date, and my peers helped me to see how much that I needed to educate myself. While I didn't think of it in these terms at the time, my experiences at university were a stark lesson in the limitations of homogeneity and the importance of diversity. And it was also the first time that I really started to understand that I wasn't just one thing. Identity is incredibly messy. We have to see our differences and recognise them, and we have to harness them in all aspects of our life, including the workplace and our teams. So back to today. Today, Dame Sue Gray will lead a fantastic panel in uncovering how, as we do the important work of embracing diversity in our teams, we can address biases and build understanding within our workplaces. Now, we know these are really weighty topics. You are going to have time in your tables to discuss them and dissect them. And then after lunch, you'll move on to the final focus of the day, which is also, you'll be glad to know, the final focus for what I'm going to say to you. Namely, that diversity is the linchpin to driving creativity and innovation. For those who haven't come across it, Matthew Syed is compelling on this topic in his absolutely fantastic book, Rebel Ideas. Matthew argues that the most significant trend in creativity and innovation is the shift from the creativity of the individual to that of the group. He notes that we must strive for collective intelligence, not individual intelligence, and that diversity is the critical ingredient for that collective intelligence. This is particularly crucial when we're trying to solve complex problems, which, as we know, engineers are doing all of the time, of course. After lunch today, you will hear how it can drive innovation and positive outcomes in engineering when the Academy's D&I Committee Chair, Alida Rios, chairs micro talks with Stantec, the University of Loughborough and Duku. We're then really privileged to have Larissa Suzuki closing the formal part of our day. Larissa is AI and space engineer at the University College London and NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So we're really going to delve into this topic of diversity and creativity and innovation. However, things won't end with the formal part of the day. We'll then welcome those online and in person, as Rosa mentioned, to join for our networking in our thought-provoking exhibition, both downstairs and live on our event webpage. This will provide opportunities for you to engage both with organisations who are striving to build diversity of thought into engineering and organisations that will help you to build greater inclusion. So before I shut up, I just want to end with two last things. Firstly, just a brief note on psychological safety. These topics are personal, they are complex, and we are aware that in the room there will be things that touch on topics which might be hard for you to discuss. Please only engage to the extent that you feel comfortable. Please know that we all will enter into these conversations with compassion and kindness. Secondly, to the extent that you want to do engage with the day, network with peers, speak to the team, and exchange ideas. Please use Slido for questions, as Rosa said, where you possibly can. And please take any knowledge that you gain back to your organisations. Action plan templates are on the tables for the people in the room, and they're also downloadable online. This is a way for you, don't have to share them with anyone if you don't want to, but this is a way for you to really think about what can I implement as a result of what I've learned today in my organisation. So finally, I'm looking forward to sharing a day with you filled with insightful discussions and actionable takeaways. But I will now stop talking, and instead I will introduce you to our keynote speaker, and it's my great pleasure to welcome Dr Francesca Happe to the stage. Dr Happe is Professor of Cognitive Neuroscience at the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience at King's College London. Francesca's research focuses on autism, and she has also explored social cognition and mentalising difficulties. She's actively engaged in studies of abilities and assets in autism and their relation to detail-focused cognitive style. Some of her recent work focuses on mental health on the autism spectrum and under-researched groups, including women and older people. Francesca leads the Respect Lab, was a past president of the International Society for Autism Research, and has a large number of prizes that she has received: the British Psychological Society Spearman Medal and President's Award, Experimental Psychology Society Prize, and Royal Society Rosalind Franklin Award. In 2021, Francesca was appointed Commander of the Order of the British Empire in the New Year's Honours for her services to the study of autism. Clearly, I'm in awe at that. I expect you all are too. So will you please welcome me in joining Francesca to the stage?
Thank you very much. And it's a great privilege and pleasure to be here with you today. So thank you for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to the whole of the day. So I'm going to talk about diversity of thought. And I want to start by asking you to close your eyes and picture in your mind an apple. Now you can open your eyes, and how did you visualize? What was in your mind's eye? It turns out that people are very different in their visual imagery abilities and propensities. So some people will not have seen anything in their mind's eye, and some people will have seen an apple as clearly as if they were looking at it. And most of us are somewhere in between. And people have studied this individual difference in thinking style, and we call lacking visual imagery aphantasia, and very, very vivid visual imagery is referred to as hyperphantasia. And what's particularly interesting about this hidden individual difference, so there may be people in the room now who are thinking, gosh, I didn't know that people saw things in their heads. I thought that was just a metaphor. And there may be other people thinking, can't everybody see things as clearly in their heads as if they were looking at it in real life? But we all go about our lives doing the same sorts of things, even though we have radically different ways of thinking in this respect. And there's been a lot of historical interest in this individual difference, although it hasn't been studied until very recently. So Albert Einstein was quoted as saying that he didn't think in words at all. And Joseph Conrad, the novelist, felt that his role as a writer was to make people see things. The Victorian psychologist Francis Galton, who unfortunately is associated with the eugenics movement, but he was the first person to create a test for visual imagery. And he used to ask people to visualize their breakfast table, their table at breakfast, and describe it to him, and describe how they were seeing it. And it turned out that Darwin, his cousin, had incredibly distinct visual imagery. And now there's a test called the Vividness of Visual Imagery questionnaire. And if you want to test your visual imagery, you are asked things like, picture a shop that you know well, the shop front. And now focus in on the shop window. How clear is it? Can you see the colors? Is it faint or is it really vivid? And so on. And you can score that. And what's particularly interesting to me is that not experiencing conscious visual imagery doesn't mean you're not imaginative or creative. So it turns out that one of Pixar's leading artists, this is actually his Disney drawing, so the head of Pixar is also aphantasic. I'm getting confused. But this artist who drew The Little Mermaid is aphantasic. So you might think that most artists are picturing something in their heads and then putting it down on paper. But this artist starts with a scribble. And then he looks at the scribble and sees, what does that look like to me? And he ends up drawing something beautiful. So you can be an artist and be aphantasic. You can also be an artist and be hyperphantasic. So this artist, Megan Ekman, and this is taken from a wonderful art exhibition of both aphantasic and hyperphantasic artists' work. She talks about how when she's walking through a forest, she might glimpse out of the corner of her eye some white fungi or something growing on a tree, and she'll see it as if it was a polar bear. And because her imagery is so vivid, it's as if it's really there. And so she's actually quite jumpy, and she didn't understand why other people didn't have that experience. And of course, it's not just imagery in the visual modality that we differ in. We can imagine in all our modalities. So this is a different questionnaire that will ask you things like, imagine the sound of an ambulance siren. And then you have to say how vivid and clear that is in your mind's ear, as it were. Or imagine the smell of burning wood, or imagine the taste of toothpaste. Imagine touching fur or putting your hand on warm sand. Imagine the feeling of going into a warm bath. So all of these imagery modalities that we all differ in. And so our inner lives, our rich inner lives, are incredibly different, even though we're going about our lives doing much the same things. So that's my introduction into neurodiversity. most of my work is on autism, and I'll talk to you about autism today, but neurodiversity refers to the range of different thinking styles and different neural bases for our differences in cognition, and the analogy is with ecological diversity. And so people often talk about neurodivergent groups, meaning those who are different from the mathematical average, or the norm in the sense of the most common way of thinking. And the neurodivergent groups, the umbrella is cast more or less widely by different people, but would certainly include autism and ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, dyscalculia, difficulty of numbers and quantities, dyslexia, and other difficulties like dyspraxia or clumsiness. And the term neurodiversity was coined by Judy Singer in the late 90s, and talked about the virtually infinite neurocognitive variability within Earth's human population. So I'm going to talk a little bit about autism today. And autism, if you're not already familiar, is a neurodevelopmental condition. It has a strong genetic basis, and it's now considered a different, not a deficient, but a different way of processing the world. And autism is a behavioral diagnosis. There's no blood test or chromosome test, and the diagnosis is given on the basis that a child or adult has some social communication differences and difficulties, at least in the neurotypical world, and rigid and repetitive interests and activities, which often include sensory sensitivities. There's been a big shift in the 30 or more years that I've been working in the autism field, both from thinking that autism was a very rare condition that was diagnosed in maybe 4 in 10,000 individuals, to recognizing that this is a very common condition, diagnosed in over 1% of children and adults. But also a big change in attitudes. So there used to be, and in some parts of the world, there's still a narrative about trying to cure autism. But for those of us in the UK and much of the world, we understand, with the help of autistic self-advocates, that that is as misunderstood as the way that psychiatrists used to seek to cure homosexuality earlier in the last century. So instead of a cure, we embrace the neurodiversity of autism and respect the differences. That doesn't mean that autistic people don't often suffer and struggle in our neurotypical world, and that autism can be a disability, but we now have a social model of disability where the disability arises not because the person is somehow broken or wrong, but because the fit between the person and their environment, their neurotypically designed environment, may result in disability. And the other thing to mention, of course, is that autism often goes along with other things that make life very difficult. So anxiety and depression are very common in autism, epilepsy, intellectual disability for some people, gastrointestinal problems, sleep problems, and so on. And all of these things make life difficult, as do stigma, being ostracized, being bullied, all the things that we as a society can take responsibility for and change. So one of the aspects of autism that I've studied is differences in cognitive style that have to do with an amazing eye for detail. So the poster here from the National Autistic Society says, when a person with autism walks into a room, the first thing they see is a pillow with a coffee stain shaped like Africa, a train ticket sticking out of a magazine, 25, can't read it from here. Well, you can read it later, but the point is, it lists all the amazing details the person is confronted with, and then it says, so it's hardly surprising that they don't pay any attention to you. Now, it's not true that autistic people don't pay attention to other people. It's not true that autistic people aren't sociable and aren't empathic. But we do know that many autistic people find it difficult to intuitively know what somebody else might be thinking, especially if what they're thinking is different from what the autistic person themselves is thinking. But the eye for detail means that autistic people are usually good at some things. Oh dear, you can't see on the slide. There should be, there's a simple shape in the square that you need to find within the complex shape. And this is a task that a lot of autistic people find extremely easy. And I've had the experience of testing a young boy on the autism spectrum with very little language who could spot these hidden shapes as fast as I could turn the page. So I go back. So Lorna Wing, who was one of the great founding figures in autism and also the mother of an autistic daughter, told me an anecdote very early in my PhD that was very influential for me. She was talking about assessing a little boy in her clinic, and started off by showing him the toys they were going to use in the assessment and asking him to name things, and he named the little toy bed and the quilt and so on. And then she pointed to the pillow and she said, "What's this?" And he said, "It's a piece of ravioli." And Lorna said when she looked at it again, it looked exactly like a piece of ravioli. It was the right size and shape and colour, but she would never have seen it that way. So the little boy wasn't making a mistake, but his perception was context-free in a way that allowed him to make an insight that she hadn't previously had. And so a lot of autistic people have an extraordinary eye for detail. And again, you may not be close enough to this for it to be fair for you to try and spot what's different in the two panels. I often, it's skipped the one which is meant to show you, oh, okay. Somebody took out the slide which is meant to show you where the differences are. So you'll have to just look at it online and figure it out. Oh, there we are. It is there. Good, it is there. And I usually find, if there are autistic people in the room, that they can tell me about some other ones I haven't seen. So if there are any others, then just do let me know. Sorry, it's a limitation of my eyesight, not of the slides. So this is Stephen Wiltshire, an autistic artist, drawing the cityscape of Tokyo from memory after a 20-minute helicopter ride. And not only is his drawing absolutely beautiful and extremely detailed, but he also draws detail to detail. He doesn't need to sketch out the whole. And again, I think it illustrates this extraordinary eye for detail in autism, which we do think is one of the starting engines for talent in autism. Now, when one talks about talent in autism, one has to be careful. I'm old enough to remember when Rain Man came out, and I was already working in autism research, and parents would say to me, well, Rain Man, it's good that it raised awareness of autism, but if another neighbour asks me, oh, you've got an autistic child, what's their special talent? Then I'm probably going to scream, because my son's special talent is having a meltdown in the supermarket when the fluorescent lights just annoy him so much. But we should recognise that around 1 in 3 autistic people are unusually good at something compared to their other profile of skills, and sometimes, like Stephen Wiltshire, unusually good at something compared to pretty much everyone else in the world. Autistic talents usually occur in music, which is often perfect pitch or being able to play by memory, art, and I've already shown you that, calculation, so lightning fast mathematical calculation or calendar calculation, being able to name the day of the week that any date falls on in the far future or past, and memory. A lot of autistic people have a staggeringly good memory for things that they're interested in. And we think that the eye for detail is a very important part of those talents, but also the social differences, I think, lead to originality in autism. So I have a picture of sheep there because neurotypicals are a bit like sheep. Children start out quirky and interesting, and then they turn into teenagers who want to look and talk and act like everyone else, or their peers, that is, or their little in-group. And part of that is that as neurotypicals, we automatically read people's minds. We automatically recognize what other people are thinking and wanting and intending, and we therefore absorb other people's thoughts. If you imagine walking along the street, if everyone's pointing up at something, you can barely resist looking as well. We're so influenced by other people's interests. And that means that we absorb also how other people think about things, and we can move towards sort of groupthink or limiting our originality. Whereas autistic people don't automatically track what others are thinking. They may be able to do it by a hard thinking and a process of mental arithmetic, but they don't automatically absorb others' thoughts. And I think that leaves them free often to have much more original ideas. And we should also remember that although liking sameness is a characteristic of autism, being repetitive is not being uncreative. And we can see that here in the lovely Monet's haystacks. So fixed and persistent interests can be really important in developing talent. And I do think it's important that we recognize these strengths, even though we mustn't forget the challenges that autistic people face. So here we have Natty Jones, who is an autistic artist who doesn't have a lot of speech, but takes enormous pride in being able to show his artwork and connecting with people through his art. Rebecca Wood has a lovely project called Autistic School Staff Project, where she has challenged schools to say, if you think you're inclusive because you are thinking about the needs of your pupils, are you inclusive to your staff? Are your staff able to say, I'm autistic, or I'm dyslexic, or I'm dyspraxic? And in her project, we found that some teachers, including head teachers who were autistic, weren't confident to disclose their diagnosis because of the way that they heard other staff members talk about autistic pupils in the school, which is shocking, I think. So there's now a big movement, I'm glad to say, to recognise the value of autistic people in the workplace. There are groups for autistic police people, for autistic doctors, for example. There are companies like Auticon that specifically recruit autistic people for their particular cognitive style, which not only includes eye for detail and persistence, but also often a very strong sense of justice and an honesty that can be perceived as blunt or can be valued as being refreshing and direct. And I've talked here about, just see if we've got the next slide in, sorry. No, I haven't got the, I wanted to have the slide about the Buckland report that came out last week. It's further on, is it? Okay, thank you. That's good to know. I'll go forward and then back. Okay, it's right at the end. Okay, so just those of you who saw in the news that the Buckland Review of Autism Employment came out very recently and is a really, really useful document highlighting some of the barriers to employment for autistic people, including the emphasis in job interviews on social skills rather than skills that are actually used in the job, and how we can address those. And the research charity Autistica has a new index by which companies can judge how autism-friendly their employment practices are. So just to go back, I wanted to remember that I've just talked about autism, but of course, neurodiversity includes ADHD and dyscalculia, dyslexia, and so on. And all of these different groups may need slightly different accommodations in work. For autistic people, sensory accommodations are enormously important, and understanding of social differences is incredibly important. We know from research that autistic people are judged negatively by non-autistic people at first encounter, but that can be mitigated by knowing that the person you're about to meet is autistic and by knowing more about autism. And if you have those two things, then you won't form a negative first impression. And so that means we need people to be able to be honest about their neurodiversity, and we need better understanding of neurodiversity. And coming from a family with several members who have ADHD, I would say just the same thing for ADHD, that if you don't understand it, you will misjudge somebody, maybe for not caring about what you're talking about if they interrupt, rather than understanding that their mind is working in a different way, and we can accommodate for each other. So final thoughts. Recognition and celebration of neurodiversity enriches workplaces. The sensory issues and distractions can be a problem for autistic people, and there can be misunderstandings about different social styles. But that can be accommodated, and we can pass beyond that if we understand more about autism. We know that neurodivergent people often mask their autistic behavior or their ADHD behavior and don't feel they can be honest, and that masking has a negative effect on mental health. People don't feel that they're being authentic. They feel it erodes their sense of self, and it's bloody hard work as well. So knowledge and understanding counter prejudice, and the bottom line is that we all need to increase our empathy, acceptance, and respect for difference. So thank you very much for inviting me to talk. I have to thank everybody who helps with our research and my research group and the people who fund our research. And thank you very much for listening. And I'm looking forward to your questions to the whole panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for grounding us for the day, giving us the wider context, and really basing it in the science. It will be fantastic to be able to build on that and see how we can reflect on how this comes to life within the engineering context as well. I am very excited that you're going to be joining our Q&A and our panel discussion now, where we'll be exploring how we can create more space for cognitive diversity within our workplaces. I'm delighted to welcome our panel chair, Luke Logan, and our wonderful panellists to the stage to dive into these insights a little more. Please do join us.
Just everybody fuel up first. Yeah. Thank you, Rosa. And good morning, everybody. And Dr. Happe, can I just kind of add my thanks? As always, when you kind of have any conversation on this subject, I realise how much I've got to learn. So I'm really pleased you're on the panel because it'd be an even tougher act to follow to have the conversation. And thanks to the rest of the panellists that I'll come to in a moment. So we're on the next step of our journey to explore cognitive diversity, and what we're going to do for this next session is to really look at it within the context of engineering and the surrounding context, so it's links to the industrial world and also maybe just touch on some of the aspects of leadership as well. We're going to be hearing from inspiring individuals that you can see in front. I'll introduce them in a moment, and one thing I would share is that I think it's really a privilege for people to be able to kind of share their lived experiences. As I think Joanna mentioned at the start, sometimes it can be difficult for us all to be open about our feelings, our experiences, and I think the fact that we've got such a broad range of panellists here are prepared to kind of give us their insights is really something to be grateful for. So thank you for that in advance. Intro to myself, just very briefly. So although I think, Joanna, you described me as wonderful, I think Mrs. Logan might use a different adjective. But thank you for that introduction anyway. But I'm a fellow with the Royal Academy of Engineering, proud to be a fellow. I sit as deputy chair on the industry leadership group, which feeds into the diversity and inclusion agenda, but I'm also the chair of the awards committee. In my former life, I've been an engineering director with Rolls-Royce, BAE Systems Air Sector, and also Weir Group, and that's led to some interesting insights along this journey of cognitive diversity, which maybe we'll bring out as well. Before I go too much further, though, what I wanted to do is introduce the panel. So, Francesca, I think you've had more than enough introduction, so we'll leave there. I'd like to introduce Moji Banjo, who is a civil and environmental engineer with Ramboll UK. And we'll give you a little bit of chance to maybe just give us a little bit more about your role in a moment, if that's okay, Moji. Rob Mitchell, who is Head of Engineering Installations for ITP Aero UK. One of the longest titles I think you've got at the moment, Rob, if I can mention that one. And then Rosie Brighty, who's founder of Divergent Consultants. Okay. So when I first heard the theme from Rosa and team, I thought this was a really impactful one, if not sensitive in some areas, to discuss in engineering. And it made me reflect on a couple of the anecdotes I went through during my time with those three companies. The first one was maybe taking back to my time with Rolls-Royce, and on behalf of the company I signed up to Autism Connect UK because a few issues had brought to light the fact that maybe as a leadership team we weren't informed and have the insights to support some of the members of the team. Part of that experience, besides just signing a charter and getting a great picture and a LinkedIn photo, was actually a real deep dive for a day or two for myself and my immediate leadership team. And I have to say it was really impactful for all of us. Gaining the awareness and some of the insights like you've just done with there, Francesca. For me, at the time, we were just changing some of the buildings, for example, and some of the best intended leadership manoeuvres that we were taking, trying to make very bright, very engaging, very collaborative spaces. We realised after just one day of training that actually, rather than being inclusive, we were risking excluding some of our team. And it really drove some hard leadership changes in how we're taking approach. The second one, which is a bit more recently, was in my time in BAE Systems. And that was particularly brought about when we were sending many of the people to work from home during the lockdown part of the pandemic. And quite heartwarmingly, I received a number of communications from some of the engineers who I didn't know personally, but they were within my organisation, who shared a view that said, thank you, Luke, thank you to the company, because this feels like the first time in my career where I've been able to operate and perform in a manner that I feel comfortable and safe to do, because we were giving them the space and the ability to kind of almost choose their working environment. And I did find it actually quite emotional. So just a couple of anecdotes from me. But anyway, it's enough from me. We've got a lot more experience and guidance from the panel. So we're going to get into those conversations now, if it's okay. So the first question that I'm going to ask all of the panelists on is, what's been your experience of cognitive diversity in the workplace? And maybe, Rob, if I could start with you, if that's okay.
By all means, Luke. So I've worked in a number of large engineering firms. Diversity of thought, I always assumed was a given. You put enough people together, you get enough different range of opinions and experiences. But I've also worked in very highly regulated industries. So you put a lot of procedures and processes around, you can stifle creativity, you can stifle diversity of thought, or certainly the ability for individuals to speak up and express different opinions. So we were discussing beforehand about, was it a positive or a negative outlook? I think on balance, it's evolving. And what I mean by that is, particularly in the engineering profession, we still value, and rightly so, experience and engineering judgment very, very highly. There is a danger that comes with that, in that we are not then receptive to people that come with different experiences or less experiences. So we have to think very carefully about, in particular as leaders, how we create the right environment for people to be at their best. And for me, it's two simple things. It's around psychological safety, and it's about everybody having a voice. But I'd add a third element to that, in that it's also around not just telling people that it's psychologically safe and that they have a voice, it actually has to be their lived experience. And I certainly personally have sat in meetings where that has been given as the preface to the meeting, and then recriminations have come days, weeks, months, even years later, in terms of, well, why did you say that at that point? Clearly, it wasn't psychologically safe. But I think when you have teams with very different experiences, when you create those boundary conditions, and it is genuine and it is their lived experience, then you really get the best out of teams. And that's certainly in some of the teams, again, more recently, when it's become higher up the agenda, more aware, where I have seen much more sort of positive endeavours for people to create that environment, and then for people to really be at their best.
No, thank you, Robert. And just if I stay with you for a second, you talked about the importance of leadership there, and you've led and still are leading some large organisations yourself. So do you find your own lived experience has adapted your leadership style for others, or is that still a journey you're on?
I think every day is a journey. So, myself personally, I was diagnosed as autistic 18 months or so ago. That was in response to my children getting diagnosed. Again, my wife would say it was obvious for many years. And for me, it suddenly made a huge amount of sense. A huge amount of sense why when I said things, people looked at me a bit strangely, and I thought I was the only right person in the room. Simple things like that actually enabled me then to manage my energy, to manage my interactions, but also to bring that cadre of people around me that understood me. Simply telling my boss, telling my peers that this is what's going on in my life, this is me. In order for me to be my best, this is the accommodation I need, has been, really unleashed my potential as an individual, and then reflecting that back into the teams I lead, I think hopefully is enabling the same effect on those.
Thank you, Rob, and thanks for the openness. Moji, can I come to you next?
Yes, actually, just on what Rob was saying is, I think being diagnosed makes a big difference in just allowing yourself to have the accommodations. I think for me, it's allowed me to operate at my best and not feel held back or constantly exhausted from the masking and just trying to conform to everyone's standard of what, an engineer should look like. But I think for me, cognitive diversity has actually led to me becoming an engineer because it plays on my strengths. So I've got a logical, analytical mind. Naturally, because of the dyslexia and autism, I'm good at problem solving because I've had to put in place adaptive strategies for me to overcome my issues. So for me, engineering is a natural fit for my brain and my life experiences. And I think for me, being able to bring my full self to work has allowed me to just harness the best of myself and not feel held back.
Wonderful. So that's the awareness, but is it also sharing with your colleagues and your organisation? Has that helped, or is it more internal than external?
It's a combination. So within my company, I lead our Ability Network, which is a employee resource group which supports people with disabilities or impairments. And I'm raising awareness of things that have helped me, and also listening and learning what other people may need to be their best. So I think I feel quite driven, and I'm enjoying. It's enjoyable. So I'm doing the things that I would. Basically, work doesn't feel like work anymore. It feels like something.
Love that.
Yeah, it just feels like something I will do anyway. So it's just more fun, really.
Excellent. No, thank you. Rosie, come to you next.
Hello.
Hello.
What was the question? Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no problem. Do you want me to give the
Yes,
question
please.
again? So what's your experience of cognitive diversity in the workplace?
There we go. So I am a neurodiversity consultant and trainer, but I used to be an engineer. So obviously now I'm working with lots of different workplaces and experiencing cognitive diversity everywhere I go, training leadership teams, discussing discrimination cases with HR, consulting with businesses about how to make their procedures and things more neuro-inclusive. But then previously to that, obviously, I'm dyslexic, dyspraxic and ADHD. So most places I was in did have cognitive diversity because I obviously had a different brain to many people around me. And so I was a mechanical design engineer. And the whole time I was in that industry, I never really felt like it was a level playing field between me and the brains around me. Not necessarily saying everyone around me was neurotypical, and maybe they thought that I was being successful, but underneath the surface, I was really, really struggling. So it was because of that I thought that I'm actually in a position. So before that, I was a teacher, which is you see in a real ADHD CV there. So before that, I was a teacher. So with my academic experience there, and then having been in a STEM environment, which is we're still quite risk averse in this environment. I thought that had kind of brought together a lot of experiences to hopefully help even this playing field, so that we can make the most of the brains we've already got.
Fantastic. And the role that you're doing now, you're seeing multiple other businesses.
Yes.
Do you see progress being made, or are you seeing the same issues and challenges regardless of business, regardless of sector?
No, there's definitely some sectors that are more, people use the word old school or old fashioned in the views, and that tends to be the more STEM techie sectors. And I think the reason behind that is it's quite a rule-driven sector. A lot of us have got into it because, so there is quite a high level of neurodiversity within the kind of either the kind of sciencey things or the really creative industries. My belief for that is that we don't fit in. And so if we work in like a sciencey things, physics has rules, we can understand rules, they don't change. I kind of know where I am there. Or going to the other side, which is the really creative side, I don't understand the rules, so I'm going to make my own. Mm-hmm. And so you see, well, anecdotally, I've seen a lot more in those ends because of that. And I think that the creative ends, they're already, well, I make my own rules. So they're quite willing to accept diversity of thought and to go, well, everybody has different needs and how can we meet them? Whereas I think the science people go, well, how can I make physics be physics best? And I like processes, and so, yeah.
Thank you, Rosie. And Francesca, last but not least, your views on cognitive diversity in the workplace?
I've been incredibly lucky to have neurodivergent students, including PhD students, and the fact that they can be open about their autism diagnosis or their ADHD diagnosis or both, and other diagnoses like dyslexia and so on, is so helpful just to be, to recognise that they may be thinking differently from me, and for me to check in with them whether my interaction style is okay or not. And I echo what you said about the pandemic, awful as it was. Actually, I had autistic students who said, when I was talking about exhaustion from being on screens, you know, that sort of Zoom fatigue when you just couldn't face another meeting, even though you wanted to talk to the next person. And they would say, but that's what interaction's been like for me the whole time. And actually, being on a screen is much better because I can sort my environment, I can stim under the table or whatever, and I can sort the lighting and so on. So just realizing that what I thought was an enriching experience of being together in the room and energizing was actually for many of them absolutely draining, even though they enjoyed social interaction. So it's just helpful to recognize that we're in a process of translation. between equal but different minds.
Oh, that's wonderful. And you could just hear in the room that people were absolutely empathising with some of the points that you made then. So just one for me, just staying with you, Francesca, if I could. You made a point during your keynote about awareness, that there may be some neurodivergency, and actually sharing it with the rest of your team. I can imagine that can be difficult for some individuals to get to the point where they want to share something which they may want to hold quite close. And I can certainly talk from experiences of having team members immediately on my first line who have eventually, I would say, have shared a diagnosis, and we'd been working together for years. And I looked to myself and thought, wow, they didn't feel safe to share that with me. Any more kind of clinical or experience-based perceptions on what I shared there?
I mean, obviously it's completely personal, and I would never push anybody to disclose their diagnosis or their divergent identity if they don't want to. I think the onus is on society and us as organisations and groups and working groups to demonstrate, and it really is about demonstrating it, not just saying it, that we are completely accepting, and that the value that we put on somebody isn't going to change, and our opinions aren't going to change if they tell us that they are autistic and so on. And if you have an environment like that, then people do feel comfortable to share. And once some people share, everybody will share. So I'm very open about being dyslexic. I wasn't until probably about 10 years ago. And so I would effectively mask. If somebody was spelling a name over the phone, I wouldn't get it the first time. I might ask them to spell it again, and then I'd just pretend that I got it. And now I'll just say, sorry, you're hitting my dyslexia spot. You're going to have to send that to me in an email or go really slowly. And once some people open, I think everyone feels they can be open. But I know that's not true everywhere. And as I gave the example of the autistic school staff, some teachers shared their diagnosis and found that incredibly helpful, and people very supportive, and some absolutely wouldn't, because they knew that there were negative attitudes.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, well, we're going to open it up a little bit. I'm going to take no more than 2 questions from the room, and then we'll jump onto Slido, which is whizzing in front of my eyes. So there's obviously lots of feedback. Thank you for that. So let's just start in the room. Please raise your hand. Apparently there's some roving mics. If anybody wants to ask a question in the room. Thank you. Got a gentleman down there in the middle.
Thank you very much for such an amazing and informative talk. Many people who have neurodiverse conditions often pre-diagnosis aren't aware that they have those, yet the effects of it are still encountered, experienced by them and by others. What sort of support, education framework needs to be put in place to ensure that even in those circumstances, we have the support, we have the necessary measures, so that, you know, we're not having to treat the person moving to the social model, as Dr. Francesca explained earlier.
Do you fancy taking that one, Francesca?
First, yes.
Yeah.
So in a lot of schools, teachers now, I'm glad to say, have the attitude that if it looks like autism, put in place the supports that work for autism. Because actually, the things that work for autism are good for everyone. Having more obvious structure, being simple and clear, and not having lots of hidden agendas and so on, using visual supports and diaries and so on, they help for everyone. So you're not going to do any harm if actually the person isn't on the autism spectrum, but you put in place the supports that they might want. And the delay for diagnosis of all of these conditions is horrendous at the moment, worse than it's ever been. And so you shouldn't, I think, require a diagnosis, but if somebody needs certain sorts of supports, we should try and put them in place.
Thank you, Francesca. Do you want to come in, Rosie? Oh, sorry.
Great. My daughter's autistic, and she goes to school where a lot of what you're describing is in place. It'd be good to know what measures are there in the workplace to actually address some of these.
So what I always recommend is just having in place flexible accommodations. So rather than treating each person has to come and say, oh, I'm ADHD, go through needs assessments, what do you need, all that kind of thing. If a workplace can just be flexible and allow everyone to meet their needs, because we all have different needs, you're still going to get some people that have such a different need that they might still need to go down that path. But if, let's say that what you're doing currently works for this many people, but you've got that many people, you're going to be having all these people who are struggling to do their work as effectively as they could. But if you just allowed a bit more flexibility, so flexi time, maybe different kind of kit. Some people might be able to have access to noise cancelling headphones so that they can control the sensory environment a bit more, work from home, all those kind of things. Just allowing people to express their own needs, because so many people are never ever going to know that they have a neuro difference. So if everyone feels safe to meet their own needs, everyone can work at their best.
Thank you, Rosie. Thank you. Great question to start us off with. One more question in the room. Any volunteer? If not, we'll head to Slido. Oh, sorry, one there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. First of all, it's an honour to be here. I myself am on the autism spectrum. In the old days, I would have been Asperger's. So I do have a problem sometimes with over-expressing myself, over-involving myself, and so my question is, I managed to get a job, and I'm managing to keep the job, which I'm very proud of. But I sometimes think that and I do find this in my workplace at the moment, that I do have the opportunity to do this, but it made me think that if companies could be more flexible in terms of what they expect from a good employee, that would help to keep, or I can only compare autistic people, but it would help keep us employed. And for example, if you know that as an autistic person might struggle to identify specific hierarchical structures, and if you in your head as managers say, this person does not pay much attention to hierarchy, and let's be okay with that. Let's be open to that. Let's see what benefit it can bring, because that means this person might help empower the small voices in our company. So it's when you open your mind to neurodiverse ways of thinking and not judging it against the expected norm, there can be benefits. So my question is, how do we, those of us who are employed and those of us looking after employees with neurodiversities, how do we address the issue of letting go of neurotypical expectations so that you can get the best out of your employee?
Well, there's a good one. Moji or Rob, any reflections to put you on the spot?
I think, as you were saying, I think the lack of awareness, just a lack of. I don't really care about hierarchies people on. So whether I'm speaking to a managing director or a CEO, I don't really care about their title. I care about the individual. So for me, some people find it quite refreshing that I'm not changing my approach depending on someone's hierarchy. I'm just speaking to them as a human being and looking for our commonalities. In terms of what leadership can do, I think just being themselves, not being their title. So rather than like presenting themselves as the CEO and like playing a role, just being a human being first and foremost. So I think it's quite just being themselves and being the best of themselves, and just allowing people to be themselves. And I think it has a domino effect for everyone.
Thank you. No, that definitely resonates. Rob?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can speak for the neurotypicals as a non-neurotypical leader myself, but I've always tried to lead teams in the way that I like to be led, but I guess that's probably different to how a neurotypical person might do so. And I have to assume I've got a full range of people within the various teams. I'm lucky that I have global teams in four different countries. I think where it's been most successful is where there's the personal connection, because very often we look to the HR department to wrap a policy and procedure around this is what we expect you to do. I think flexible working is a great example, particularly as we move post-COVID into hybrid model. The policy says this, but I know that I have a relationship with my boss and my team that says, actually, you do what's best for you. If today it's not best for you to come into the office, as long as you're still productive, that's what we want, because it's better that way than you're off sick. So yeah, for me, it's openness, it's honesty, and it's trust, and it's living that, not just saying, here's the policy, go away, read the policy, follow it.
Fantastic. And I'll just come in with a couple of reflections as well. For me, going through the experience of the Autism Connect training that we did, I came out with a real reflection that I needed to kind of be curious. So whenever I saw something that was atypical, before taking my standard kind of leadership action, was just to kind of be a bit curious for a moment and assume that there's a positive intent. Now, we're all human, and there was times that I was okay at that, and times when I, in reflection, probably wasn't as curious as I should have been. But I think that was the big takeaway from me, and that's certainly, I know it's definitely resonated with some of the leaders that are still in that business now. So great question. I'm going to go to Slido now, so thanks for the questions in the room. The one with the 9 ticks is, what are some examples of accommodations or adjustments for neurodiverse people that you've seen in the workplace?
We've had some good examples in terms of managing sound sensitivity. We've done some work around visual sensitivity, and a lot of us will know that fluorescent lights are not the favourite. But we also found that cluttered visual environments can be actually almost physically painful for some neurodivergent people. And so thinking about what's the ideal working environment for that person, what do they need? So sensory is a big one, I think. And then the other one we've already touched on, thanks to that good question. And I think your point about assuming good intent is a great one, because it's when we are jumping to a conclusion that somebody's behaviour comes from an intention that is from our neurotypical angle that we get into difficulties. So that the person who's speaking bluntly to us is wanting to be rude, when in fact they're just wanting to be frank and save time and not dance around like English people like to dance around. So I think those are two that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I think one that in our workplaces, for online meetings or for hybrid meetings, in that we started off those going, everybody has to have the camera on. We have to see everybody to know that they're really here, they're really present, they're fully engaged. And we didn't realise quite the effect that was having. And I would dread those meetings. Oh God, really? Because normally I'd be multitasking. That's my way of controlling or splitting my attention, depending on your point of view. So we just said, no, you put the camera on if you're comfortable. Yeah? Mm-hmm. And it's just a really simple thing, and let the person take control. And it's amazing then how many more cameras came on when they wanted to contribute, rather than just staying off.
Is there something in there about leaders letting go a bit here as well then, and almost permitting people to be more flexible? Is that where you're leading us?
Certainly for me personally, I think Francesca said it in her talk around the, I love rules, but when I'm setting the rules. I don't like it when rules are imposed upon me, which is good because I'm a leader, but I also operate in a complex organisation. So, I try to empower my team to have less rules because that's the way I like my life to be. So some of them love it and some of them don't. But
Excellent. Sorry, Moji, I can see you're desperate to come in.
And I think also, let's say someone's wearing headphones in the office, not assuming they're being antisocial, they might just be trying to control their sensory environment. So I think, as you're saying, not assuming bad intentions, just being open and curious about other people.
Wonderful. There's something practical in there. Sorry, Rosie, did you want to come in as well?
Something about the sensory accommodations.
Yeah.
That's a really great place to start when you're introducing things. Everyone's learned about sensory stuff. You learned about it from being age 3 or 4. So people are comfortable talking about their own sensory needs a bit more. But also, we've got different parts of our brains, and our kind of most basic brain is like our reptilian brain. And even reptiles judge things using their senses. So someone like me, who I'm really visually oversensitive, I can't filter things out. When I get stressed out, I can see my nose. I can't filter that out. So if I go into an environment and I'm stressed out, that sends my brain out of whack. My central nervous system is having a terrible time. And at the most basic level, my body is in stress. So how am I going to be able to do a bomb change? I'm not. Being dyslexic, bomb changes have never gone well. But it's going to make it even worse when my sensory environment doesn't meet my needs. So as a starting accommodation, that's just huge.
And you made me shudder when you start talking about bomb changes. That takes me back several years. So thank you for that, Rosie. Right, we're going to go to another question now. So this one's an interesting one. Can engineers openly share their neurodivergent traits in engineering? Why is there stigma, bias and masking in engineering? That's an interesting one, a little bit contentious, but I absolutely can see the reason why it's been asked. Anybody feel they've got any insights?
I'll make a start while everybody else
Thank you, Rob.
is thinking. So I mentioned earlier about being diagnosed autistic and sharing that with my work colleagues. These are work colleagues who I've known for a number of years, but there are colleagues in my global organisation who I don't feel comfortable to share that with.
Yeah.
And that may be my view on the perception or the stigma, or in some regards that they will try and over-accommodate. They think they will make adjustments to be well-intentioned, but they're actually not the adjustments that I need. So for me personally, and I know it's for other people that have disclosed information to me, they are quite selective. So it is that balance between the right environment so people feel safe to disclose, but not forcing everybody to disclose, and then overreacting to it.
So that's really interesting then that you talked about there's a slight fear or anxiety that somebody may overswing and overreact and almost mollycoddle. Is that
yeah, because it then becomes, what adjustments can I make? What can I do for you? What can I do for you? And something like that. I just want you to be aware, and I will self-regulate. I'll leave the room if I need to. I will make adjustments. Sometimes I need help, and I will ask for help. For me personally, I'm sure for others it's different. But
do you think, I'm an eternal optimist, so bear with me on this one panel, but I guess I'm old enough to remember a time when people wouldn't even talk about being black and wouldn't refer to me, being non-white, because it was almost seen as a kind of a no-go area. And now black is almost celebrated, in kind of many environments. Do you think with some of the other variants of diversity, including cognitive diversity, do you think it's just symptomatic of where we are on change and awareness curve, or do you think there are some special challenges or maybe even opportunities for cognitive diversity?
I think attitudes are definitely improving. Awareness, you see, celebrities disclosing their often recent autism diagnosis. The recognition of autism has changed, so it used to be a much more narrow diagnosis. So it may be that also in some organisations the leadership are of a generation where we haven't really kept up with how autism is thought about now. And they do think of it as, a disorder, and so they don't recognise. And I have to say that some, particularly autistic and neurodivergent women, will say that when they do disclose their diagnosis, people will say, "Oh, but you don't look autistic," or "Are you really? You don't seem it," or "You're married, you can't be autistic." So those old-fashioned ideas are not helpful. They're not going to encourage anybody to be open and to feel accepted.
Thank you, Francesca. Sorry, Rosie?
Just on what
Yeah, go for it, Rosie.
Sorry, Rosie.
It's good when you're fighting to come in. That's brilliant. Yeah.
So I was just going to say, because when I was first diagnosed 9 months ago, that was the first thing I had from my family. Like, you don't look autistic, you've achieved this, you've achieved all this, how can you be autistic? But I think it's just that awareness that it looks different in different groups. So, for example, if you have autism and ADHD, it's not just the standard stereotypical look of it. So I think in terms of people feeling comfortable to be themselves, it's a tricky one, because it comes from, as you were saying, is that person a safe person? Do you feel you might be mollycoddled, or people might think you're less capable? So it depends on the circumstance and how much you trust that person and the relationship.
Thank you, Moji. And Rosie?
I think with you saying where we are on that awareness curve, I think as diversity, it crosses every diversity, every culture, every gender, every race, every sexuality. All have brains and all have different thought styles. So I think it's such an important one to nail, because it kind of, if you've really got the diversity of thought, if you've really got neurodiversity down, then there's a lot of other inclusions that just kind of fall into place, like a lot of things that you need to put into place for neurodivergent people. You also need to put in place for pregnant people or people on the menopause. So there's a lot of things that are going with that.
So should we be flipping this and using cognitive diversity as a pull through for some of the other aspects of diversity from what you've shared
I
there?
think so.
Right.
I think it's a great starting point, but I would, because it's my job.
Lovely, yeah, absolutely. I'm very honest, yeah. So I'm going to take one last one from Slido, then we'll start bringing the session to a conclusion. So can you make a definition distinction between thinking differently, cognitive diversity and neurodivergent? That's a really interesting one. Wow.
I would struggle.
Got us thinking. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, we all think differently. Our neurodivergence, it tends to be talking about individuals who don't think like the average, like the majority of people. Mm-hmm. But moment to moment, we all think differently. So, I mean, there's a difference between different personalities, for example, and being neurodivergent, because you can get every combination. So you can be an extrovert autistic person or an introvert autistic person and so on. And I suppose I take that opportunity to mention intersectionality, as was mentioned in the introduction, that nobody's solely neurodivergent. They're also whatever, whatever background they come from and whatever gender identity and so on. And those things intersect, and some people are multiple minorities, and that can bring its own sort of stress.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other thoughts sparked, or are you happy that Francesca jumped in the panel? It's a good one, isn't it? It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, I think I can't do the word definition justice that Francesca's done, but I remember maybe 10 years ago seeing a graduate recruitment panel looking at a demographic diversity in the room, a visible diversity. But it was a group of individuals that all went to the same 3 or 4 universities, that had all been trained in the same sort of way and came out with all exactly the same sort of answers. And that's the sort of light bulb moment for me when I went, we're not actually getting the diversity that we want here. We're getting a demographic diversity, not a diversity of thought. Sometimes they go hand in hand, sometimes they do not, and that makes it tricky.
And it's really interesting. You've just prompted me to think of an example recently where I was in a relatively large organisation that had got lots of applicants for roles. And because of that, they were using a degree of AI sifting before they got through to interview stages. And what we were finding out retrospectively was as it was filtering out some amazing candidates, because actually how they were presenting electronically, not in person, was putting them at a disadvantage. Now, that was still very much open, and if there's any experts in the room, I'd love to have a coffee with you and find out how we overcome some of those automated approaches. But I think for now, thanks to everybody online and thanks to everybody in the room, some fantastic questions. There's far more questions that we've got a chance to kind of answer, but we'll absolutely, with the Academy team, look at the questions and hopefully follow up on all of those. But I've got to say thank you to the panel. Your openness and I think the context and the passion on many of the questions that you all brought to life was really fantastic. So thank you for that. Before we give you a round of applause and let you get off stage and relax, though, there's probably just one final quick question I'm going to ask each of you. And that's if you could encourage employers to explore just one opportunity to enable this space, what could it be? So one opportunity.
So for me, it's that flexibility. It's making the most of the brains you already have. And if you're flexible, it's going to save you a lot of money as well.
Love it. Thank you, Rosie.
I think for me, it would be a little self-test that everybody at every level of the organisation can do, which is when somebody says something that you didn't expect, what's your initial reaction? Because if that was interesting, I think you're already halfway there.
Thank you.
I think for me, it's seeing this as an opportunity to get the best out of your people and just harness talent you already have.
Wonderful, thank you.
I think increase understanding, question assumptions.
Excellent, thank you, and perfect keeping it concise at the end, so really appreciate it. I'm sure you'll agree they've been a wonderful panel, so let's show our appreciation. Many thanks. And I was going to hand over to Rosa, but she's already here, so I must be running late.
No, you're not. You're not. You're doing well. In fact, we are a whole minute early. I wholeheartedly echo Luke's comments there. Thank you so much all for your openness and for sharing your insights. This was a phenomenal panel and a brilliant way to start our day. So thank you so much. We are going to be opening up the conversation a little bit more after our break, but I think it is about time that we have a break. So we will be back at 12:10 for our panel on breaking bias and building understanding, and the chance to collaborate and share best practice through our table talks. So please do, if you're at home, please go and grab yourself, or from the office, please go and grab yourself a drink, take a screen break. If you are in the room with us, tea and coffees will be served just outside. But before you go, please do join me in thanking our panel one last time.